My name is Serena Tennant, and I was 34 the summer my mom stood up at my sister's engagement party with a manila envelope in her hand. She tapped a glass with a butter knife, waited until 60 people went quiet, and read a laboratory conclusion about my 6-year-old daughter out loud. Alleged father, excluded. Probability of paternity, 0%. Then she lowered the paper and said it. She's not his. Nobody moved. I let my mom finish. What she never did was turn the page. She had checked the cheapest box on the order form, and that box compares every sample in the envelope against every other one. There were 6 samples in there. 2 of them she collected in my bathroom on Easter Sunday. 8 days before that party, I read page 3 myself. What I did with it is the part I still think about. Welcome back to Wise Family Revenge. This is where we sit with the quiet women who finally stop absorbing it. The ones who set a boundary instead of a fire and change a family line while they do it. If that is you, you are in the right place. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. I have been a nurse for 11 years. The last 9 of those were nights in the neonatal unit at Marion General, 26 miles from my house, 35 minutes if the light at Route 9 cooperates. My job is small babies and enormous news. I weigh a child in grams and then I say the number out loud in pounds, because grams mean nothing to a father who has been awake for 2 days. That is basically the whole job. Take a terrible number, hand it over in a shape a person can hold. I am good at it. I sit down first. I keep my hands still. I use short sentences and I do not decorate anything, because decoration is what people remember later and hate you for. Margot Dunlap, our charge nurse, once told a new grad to watch me deliver bad news, and I took that as the highest compliment of my life. I live in Kellerton, Ohio, population 8,400, where the grocery store has one good checker and everybody knows which pew you sit in. My husband Adam teaches high school physics. Our daughter Wren was 6 that spring and read every sign out loud from the back seat, including the ones about hazardous waste. My parents live 3.5 miles away on Sycamore Street, in the house I grew up in, 8 minutes door to door. My sister Nora lives above the dental office where she works. And in my family, I was the one everybody called when something went wrong. Car trouble, insurance letters, a scan somebody didn't understand, a fight that needed a translator. I thought that was a compliment too. It took me 34 years to find out what that job actually was. Adam was 26 when he found the lump. That was 2014, the year we got engaged, and it moved fast in both directions. Surgery in October, chemotherapy through the winter, clean scans by spring. We banked 1 sample before the first cycle because the oncology nurse pushed us hard to do it in the 4 days we had. In 2017, the clinic thawed it and it did not survive, and a very kind woman in Columbus explained that this happens and that she was sorry. So we sat at our kitchen table with a folder of options and picked one. Donor insemination, 3 years of paperwork, 2 failed cycles, 1 ultrasound in the summer of 2018, where the technician turned the screen toward us without saying anything. Wren was born in March of 2019 at 6:30 in the morning. Adam cut the cord with his hands shaking so badly the midwife had to steady his wrist. We did not keep it secret because we were ashamed. We kept it quiet because we live in Kellerton, and in Kellerton a fact does not stay a fact. It becomes a thing people say gently at the post office while they watch your face. We had a plan, and the plan was mine. I would tell Wren myself when she was 10, at our kitchen table, with the whole story in my own words and no audience. Adam used to call her the paperwork kid, and she thought it was a joke about the printer. There is a folder in our fire safe with a donor number on it, 6 digits, and a 2-page medical history of a man neither of us will ever meet. Adam read it once and put it away, and has never asked to see it again. 3 people knew. Me, Adam, and a doctor 2 hours away. That number mattered later. Sunday dinner at Sycamore Street was a fixed object in my week, like a shift. My mother, Delia, is 70. She keeps her hair set, she keeps her voice pleasant, and she has never once raised it in public. She writes every expense in a green ledger book she has kept since 1988, including the 60 cents she puts in the church coffee jar. My dad Ray is 73, retired off farm equipment repair, and he has grease in the creases of his hands that will outlive all of us. That April, Nora came in holding her left hand out like it was on fire, and the ring caught the light over the table, and my mother was up and around the table before anybody said congratulations. Grant Whitfield. The Whitfields have the orchard out on Route 9 and a name that has been on things in this county since before the courthouse burned. Within 10 minutes, my mother was talking about the ceremony program. Not the dress. The program. And the page in the program where they print the family names. Then she looked at Ren for a beat too long, the way you look at a car you are thinking about buying, and said, "She doesn't favor anybody, does she?" Nora laughed. Grant said something about noses skipping generations. My dad handed Ren a piece of bread and said nothing at all, which was the most Ray Tennant thing he could have done. And my mother folded her napkin and said the line she had been saying my whole life, the one I could have written on the inside of my own arm. "Somebody has to keep this family clean." I went to get the coffee. Under the green ledger on the counter, folded into quarters, was a glossy trifold brochure with a double helix printed on the front. Nora asked me to be her matron of honor on a Tuesday, in the parking lot of the dental office, still in her scrubs. She cried a little. I said yes before she finished the question. Then she handed me a piece of paper Corinne Whitfield had emailed her, and I read it twice to make sure it was real. Family history page, 3 generations of names, grandparents, parents, years married, occupations, church affiliation. "It's just a page," Nora said. "Grant thinks it's ridiculous too." She said it the way you say a thing you have already decided to do. I filled in my part in the car. Serena Tennant, registered nurse. Adam Shaw, teacher. Under my parents, I left the year blank because I could never keep it straight, 1985 or 1986, and it seemed like the kind of detail you should get right on a piece of paper that goes in a church. That night, my mother called me at 9:40. She wanted to know what color Ren's eyes were listed as on her birth certificate. Not what color they are. What they were listed as. I told her I would have to look. Then I stood in my own hallway with the phone in my hand and did the arithmetic that every woman in my family learns young. What does she actually want, and what is she going to do with it? She had held that certificate herself, at the hospital, when Ren was 2 days old. She had read it out loud to the room, every line of it, the weight and the length and the time of birth, in the same voice she uses for the scripture reading. She has a photograph of herself holding it. It is on her refrigerator. Whatever she wanted at 9:40 at night, it was not the color of my daughter's eyes. Easter Sunday was at my house that year, April 20th, 22 people and a ham. I got up at 5 to start. Around 2 o'clock I went upstairs for more hand towels and saw the guest bathroom door standing open about 6 inches. My mother was at the sink with her back to me. She had Ren's hairbrush in her left hand, the purple one with the cat on it, and she was pulling hair out of the bristles with 2 fingers. On the counter, open and squared up like she had planned the geometry, was a sandwich bag. Next to it was Adam's razor cartridge, the one he had thrown in the wastebasket the day before. It was not in the wastebasket anymore. She did not jump when the floor creaked. She turned around with the brush still in her hand and said, "I'm just tidying up in here." I closed the door behind me so the party stayed downstairs. I asked her what she was doing. She said Ren's hair was getting in the drain. I said the drain was fine. We stood there for maybe 15 seconds, close enough that I could smell her hairspray, and then she set the brush down on the counter very carefully, like she was returning something she had borrowed. "Blood doesn't lie, Serena," she said. "That's all. Blood doesn't lie." Then she washed her hands, dried them on my towel, and went downstairs to cut the pie. I stood in that bathroom and inventoried it like a crime scene, which is exactly what it was. The sandwich bag was gone from the counter. So was the razor. And in the cup by the shower, where my sister had left it after staying over Friday, the purple head from Nora's electric toothbrush was missing too. My wine glass from lunch had been washed and set upside down on a paper towel, alone, on the far side of the sink. Monday I started calling labs. There are 6 accredited relationship testing outfits within 200 miles of Kellerton, and I got a human being at 5 of them. I explained that I was the legal guardian of a 6-year-old, that I believed a sample had been taken from her without my consent, and that I was formally revoking any consent anyone had claimed to give on my behalf. 4 of them told me to put it in writing. So I did. 6 letters, certified mail, return receipt, each one with a copy of Ren's birth certificate, and my driver's license stapled behind it. $11.40 apiece. I changed the latch on the guest bathroom door and bought Ren a new brush and threw the old one in the outside can. Then I paid a family attorney in Marion $150 for half an hour, and she was decent enough to give me the bad news in the first 5 minutes. Ohio has no criminal statute that covers a grandmother taking a hairbrush. The consumer labs sell 2 tiers. The legal tier has chain of custody and witness consent and runs upward of $500. The other tier says peace of mind on the box, is not admissible anywhere, and does not verify that anybody agreed to anything. They'll test a coffee cup, she said. That's the product. I asked what I could sue for. She asked what my damages were, and then she watched me try to answer that. I drove home with 6 tracking numbers in my phone and the feeling that I had sealed the doors. I had. Every door I knew about. What I had not accounted for was that my mother would fill out the form with a child's initials and a birth year that was off by 1. My dad has taken Ren to swim lessons every Tuesday since she was 4. He is not a talker. He is a man who will spend 40 minutes tightening something and consider that a conversation. That Tuesday I came by Sycamore early to drop off a casserole dish, and they were out in the shop, Ren sitting up on the workbench swinging her legs, Ray with a carburetor in pieces on a rag. She was asking him about being old. He was answering every question like it was a serious engineering problem, which is why she asks him and not me. Then she asked him what my mom looked like when I was born. I stopped in the shop doorway where they couldn't see me. 6 pounds, 1 ounce, he said. And mad about it. He told her the rest the way he has told it every year of my life. The clock on the wall by the scale said 4:20 in the morning. The nurse had cold hands. He was standing right there at the scale when they set me down, and the scale was one of those old ones with the sliding weight, and he watched the little brass thing come to rest. He always says the same numbers. He always taps the workbench twice when he says mad about it. Ren said, "That's not very much." And he said, "It was enough," and went back to the carburetor. I stood in that doorway with a casserole dish in my hands. My father has told that story at least once a year for 34 years. At Thanksgiving, at graduations, at my wedding rehearsal with a beer in his hand and his tie already off. It is the only story in my family that nobody has ever edited. I want you to remember that. 2 weeks went by and nothing happened, which is how it works here. Nobody in Kellerton accuses anybody of anything. On the first Saturday in May, my mother worked the bake sale table at Grace Fellowship, and she said the same sentence to at least 3 women, because all 3 of them found a way to repeat it back to me inside of 9 days. She doesn't favor anybody, does she? That is the whole weapon. There is no verb in it. You cannot correct it, you cannot deny it, and you cannot get angry about it without looking like you have something to be angry about. By that Friday, Ren's first-grade teacher stopped me in the pickup line to ask, very carefully, whether we wanted to opt out of the family tree project in a few weeks, since some families prefer to. Nobody had ever asked me that before. On Tuesday, the woman at the pharmacy counter handed me Adam's allergy refill and asked how he was holding up. Poor thing, with real warmth in her voice, and I could not for the life of me figure out what she thought had happened to him. My mother never said a false word. She never said an unkind one. She just set a question down in the middle of a town that has nothing to do on Wednesdays, and then she stood back and let 8,400 people carry it for her. By the end of May, my daughter's face had become a topic at a bake sale table. I had not lost an argument. Nobody had given me one. I had lost the right to be the one who tells it, and you do not get that back by explaining yourself, because explaining yourself is the confession they were waiting on. I asked her to meet me at Dots on a Thursday morning because Dots has hard chairs and no back room. I did not want a kitchen. Kitchens are hers. She came in 11 minutes early with her purse in the crook of her arm and ordered coffee and a half order of toast, which is what she has ordered in that building since the Reagan administration. I told her plainly. I said I knew she had taken Ren's hairbrush and Adam's razor out of my bathroom. I said I had revoked consent with every lab in the region in writing. I said if she had sent anything anywhere, she needed to stop it now, today, and I would never bring it up again. I did not raise my voice, and neither did she. And to anybody at the counter we looked like a mother and daughter discussing a wedding. She turned her cup a quarter turn on the saucer. Then she said, "Is there something you'd like to say to me?" That was the door. She held it open for me and she meant it. I could have put the whole thing on that table in 90 seconds. Chemotherapy and the clinic in Columbus and the 2 failed cycles, and she would have had it. I looked at my mother's face and I understood exactly what she would do with it. Not out of malice, out of a kind of housekeeping. So I said no. I said I was asking her to stop. That was all. She said, "Then I don't know what you want from me." She paid for both of us at the register, which she always does, and while she was getting her wallet, I saw a certified mail receipt folded in half in the bill compartment. I could not read the date. Corinne Whitfield had both families over for iced tea in the second week of May. 62 years old, cardigan in June, and a laugh she uses like a turn signal. She is not a cruel woman. She is a woman who keeps the book on who is who, and in a county like this one, somebody always volunteers for that. She had a draft of the ceremony program in a plastic sleeve. 3 generations of names in a serif font. Grandparents, parents, years married, occupations, and a line at the bottom about the orchard being planted in 1911. My mother came alive in that room in a way I had not seen in years. She sat forward. She corrected the spelling of her own mother's maiden name. She told the story about the orchard's first cider press, and Corinne let her tell it. Nora laughed at everything, twice as loud as anything was funny, and Grant kept refilling glasses that were already full. At one point, Corinne asked, sweetly, whether there were any other grandchildren to list besides Ren, and my mother said, "Just the one so far," and looked at the window. I watched my mother pick up the pencil and change a number in the parents' row, then rub it out with the eraser and blow the crumbs off the plastic sleeve. She put the pencil down. She did not write anything back in. Nobody else at that table saw it. I noticed it the way you notice a sound in a house at night, which is to say I filed it and forgot it. The row said married 1986. She had started to make the 6 into something else. I have thought about that pencil probably 200 times since. Adam is the most patient person I have ever met, and I say that as somebody who works with residents. He did not get angry at me when I told him about the bathroom. He got quiet, and then he went outside and stacked firewood we did not need, in May, for about an hour. When he came back in, he had it worked out in his head, the way he works out anything. He sat down across from me and he said he had done 12 weeks of chemotherapy at 26 years old so that he could live long enough to be somebody's father. He said he had gone to every appointment, filled out every form, signed his name in a room with a clipboard and a stranger, and that at no point in any of it had he needed a laboratory to tell him whose kid Ren was. Then he set his condition, and he said it once. If there is any sign that this becomes a show, Ren and I are not in the room. I'm not negotiating that part. I said the party was 3 weeks out and my mother would not do anything at Nora's engagement. He said, "Okay." He said it the way you say okay to a person who has already decided. Then he said one more thing, still calm, still looking right at me. He said the folder in the fire safe was Ren's to open when she was old enough to want it, and that the day somebody else opened it for her, she would spend the rest of her life feeling like a subject instead of a kid. He was right. That is the problem with Adam. He is right most of the time. It almost never helps in the moment. And then 6 weeks later, you are standing in a parking lot understanding that he saw the whole thing from the porch. 2 nights later, I was on shift when a head ultrasound came back bad on a 27-weeker. The parents were 19 and 21 and they had been sleeping in the family lounge for 9 days. I did what I do. I found a room with a door. I sat down first. I told them what the scan showed, in order, in short sentences, and I did not decorate it. Then the mother looked up at me with her chin shaking and asked, "Are you telling me everything?" And I heard myself say, "I'm telling you what we know right now." It is a true sentence. It is also the most useful sentence in the English language if what you actually want is control of a room. I have said it 1,000 times. That night I heard it in my mother's voice. Same warmth, same tidy edges, same quiet decision, made by me, about how much another adult was allowed to carry at one time. I finished the conversation. I got them coffee out of the machine that takes the badge. I charted it in the flat language we chart in. Then I stood in the clean supply closet with my hand on a shelf of folded blankets for longer than I want to admit, doing a thing I had never done in 11 years, which was going back over what I had left out and asking myself who I left it out for. I've sat with a lot of families on the worst night of their lives. The ones who come through it are the ones somebody told the truth to early, in plain words, while they still had choices left. If there's somebody in your family who has been deciding what you're allowed to know, put one word in the comments for me. Heard. And subscribe, because the next part is where I stop being the calm one. On June 3rd at 2:10 in the afternoon, a woman named Joanne Meeks called my cell phone from a Marion area code. She said she was the compliance officer at Ashgrove Genetics in Marion. She had the voice of somebody reading from a procedure, which turned out to be a mercy. She said my certified letter had been matched to an open file. She said the reason it had taken 6 weeks was that the participant in question had been entered as W.S. with a birth year that was off by 1, so the automated check had not flagged it. She said the panel contained 6 specimens. She said it had been processed on May 21st and the printed report had been released in person to the submitting party on May 28th. Then she said the part she was required to say. Under their policy, when a minor's specimen has been processed without documented guardian consent, they notify the legal guardian, provide the complete report, and identify the submitter. She asked if I was ready. I said yes. She said, "The submitting party is Delia J. Tennant." I was standing in the hallway outside the family lounge with a stack of clean blankets against my hip. I asked her to mail it. I said I did not want to hear it over the phone, and she said that was completely understandable and gave me a case number. I put the blankets in the warmer. I clocked out for lunch and did not eat. Then I went out to my car, sat in the driver's seat with the door open and one foot on the pavement, and called her back 4 minutes later. I asked her one thing. I asked whether there was anything else in that report I would want to be sitting down for. Joanne Meeks was quiet for about 3 seconds, and then she said, "Yes, ma'am, there is." The envelope came June 5th. I did not open it in my house. I have a rule about what comes through my front door, and it is a rule I made the first year in the unit. You do not carry it into a room where a child sleeps. So it rode in my bag until the next morning, and at 20 to 6, before a day shift I had picked up, I sat in my Corolla on level 3 of the parking garage at Marion General with the dome light on and my thermos between my knees, and I opened it there. Page 1 was the conclusion box, the same one she would read out loud 8 days later. Atom excluded. 0%. I already knew that. I had known it before the lab did. Page 2 was a table of markers and numbers that meant nothing to me. Page 3 had a heading in plain type, additional findings, all pairs analysis. Underneath it was a legend, 6 lines, each sample letter matched to a name. She had submitted her own cheek swab. She had submitted my father's dental floss pick. She had submitted my sister's toothbrush head, and my wine glass, and Wren's hair, and Adam's razor. 6 specimens because the order form offers named comparisons at $79 each, or the full matrix, up to 6 participants, included at no extra charge. She took the free one. The findings ran 4 lines. Wren and Delia, consistent with maternal grandmother. Wren and me, mother, 99.99%. Then, sample R2, Raymond Tennant, is excluded as the biological father of sample M1, Serena Tennant. Probability 0%, and under that, samples M1 and N1 are consistent with a half-sibling relationship. Full sibling hypothesis excluded. I sat in that car for 19 minutes with the dome light on. Then I put the 3 pages back in the envelope, put the envelope in the glove box, locked the car, and worked a 12-hour shift. That envelope stayed in that glove box for 8 days. Everything after this is about what I did not do with it. At 2 in the morning, I sat on my closet floor with my laptop so the light would not wake Adam, and I typed a name I had heard maybe 11 times in my life. Emmett Vance. In my family, he does not have a story. He has a category. Before your father. My mother married him in 1979 and divorced him in March of 1985, and the entire account of 6 years of a woman's life is, he drank, and then he was gone, and we do not need to get into it. I found him in about 40 minutes. A rural electric cooperative newsletter, a retirement notice, a photograph of a thin old man in a co-op jacket standing next to a bucket truck. 38 years on the line. The caption said he had not missed an ice storm since 1986. I found an address in Ashland, 71 miles from my driveway, an hour and 20 minutes if you take the state route. I did not call. I got a piece of paper instead and did the kind of arithmetic a child could do. My parents separated in February of 1990 and got back together in July. 5 months. My mother stayed with her aunt that spring, and her aunt lived in Ashland. I was born the following April. There was one more thing, and it had been sitting in plain sight my whole life. My parents' anniversary is in June. Every card I ever signed said 1986. But the year my mother said out loud, on the 2 occasions I ever heard her say it, was 1985, and she corrected herself both times, fast, the way you correct a wrong turn. I sat on the floor of my closet and subtracted, and the numbers fit inside each other like nesting bowls, and I understood that I had been looking at this from the wrong side my entire life. That Sunday, I sat at my parents' table and ate pot roast I could not taste. My father asked if I was working too many nights, and I said no, and he let it go, because he always lets it go. My mother talked about chair rentals. Nora talked about a florist in Marion who wanted $400 for something called greenery, and Wren, who had been quiet for 11 straight minutes, which is a record, looked up at my dad with a fork in her fist and asked, "Grandpa, whose nose do I have?" Everybody laughed. Grant said hers was a tenant nose for sure. Nora said it was mine. My father put his hand flat on the top of Wren's head, the way he has always done, like he is checking whether a bolt is seated, and said, "You got your own." My mother did not laugh. She looked at the tablecloth and she smoothed it with 2 fingers, and she did not say one word. I sat 6 feet from my father with a piece of information in my glove box that would take his whole life apart, and I passed him the green beans. That was the week I stopped being able to tell myself a story about myself. I was not protecting him. I was managing him. I had decided, all by myself on a Sunday, that a 73-year-old man was not ready. My mother decides what people are allowed to know, and she does it with a bake sale table. I decide what people are allowed to know, and I do it with green beans and a pleasant face. There is a difference in volume. I could not find a difference in kind. Monday, I called Ashgrove back and asked for Joanne Meeks by name. I had one question, and I had rehearsed it in the car so it would come out clean. Did the submitting party receive the identical document I received? She checked. She said yes. Same 3 pages, same legend, same staple in the upper left corner, released in person on May 28th, with a signature on file. Then I asked the second question, and I knew the answer before she said it. Do you have any way to know whether she read past page 1? There was a pause on the line, and Joanne said gently, "No, ma'am. We don't track that." I thanked her. I sat in the driveway with the engine off. My mother is 70 years old. She wears drugstore readers on a beaded chain, and she takes them off to look at anything more than a foot away. She had driven 26 miles to Marion to pick that report up in person, rather than wait for the mail, because she wanted it in her hand. And on page 1, inside a black box, in a font twice the size of everything else, was the only sentence she had spent $400 and 2 months of her life to obtain. Pages 2 and 3 are tables, loci and index values and decimals. Nothing in a black box, nothing worth taking off your readers for. There was one more thing that told me, if my mother had read page 3 on the 28th of May, she would not have made it to the 14th of June. She would have driven to my house that night. She had the same 3 pages I had. I was almost sure she had only read one of them. almost. Monday evening, I drove the 3.5 miles to Sycamore Street and asked my mother to sit down with me in the front room, where nobody sits. I made her an offer. I said I would tell the whole family about Ren myself. All of it. In that room. After the wedding. With no outsiders and no program and no page. I said I would answer every question she had. I said all I wanted was July. She listened with her hands in her lap. Then she got up and went to the hall closet and came back with a church directory. Spiral bound, dated 1986, and she opened it to a page she did not have to look for. There she was in a row of small photographs. Somebody had drawn 2 ballpoint lines through her name. She said it flat, like a grocery list. She lost the secretary job at the elementary school in the fall of 1985. Her Sunday school class went to a woman named Bernice Fowler. For 3 summers she sat in the last pew with her mother because that is where they put you. She was 30 years old. Then she closed the directory and set it on the coffee table, squared to the edge. Somebody has to keep this family clean, she said. After the wedding is no good to me. Nora does not get to walk into that house with something standing behind her. I said her name. I said, they did that to you, and you are about to do it to me in front of 60 people. She stopped with her hand on the closet door. She said, they did it to me because I gave them something to do it with. That is the closest my mother has ever come to explaining herself. Then she put the directory away, and from the hallway, not looking at me, she said, Corinne Whitfield already knew there was something. Tuesday afternoon I met Nora at the bridal shop in Marion for her second fitting. The dress was ivory and too tight through the ribs, and the woman with the pins kept saying it was an easy fix. Nora started crying about the ribs. Then she kept crying, and it stopped being about the ribs, and the woman with the pins found something to do in the back. My sister sat down on the little carpeted step in front of the mirrors in a $500 dress and said she was scared. Not of Grant. Of the year in front of her. Of Corinne. Of a program with a page in it. Then she looked up at me in the mirror and asked, is there anything I should know? I opened my mouth. I had the whole thing loaded, the clinic and the chemotherapy and the 6 samples and the 3 pages in my glove box out in that parking lot, and I had her name half out of my mouth when she said, fast, because whatever it is, can it wait until July? Please, just let me have June. She had her hands pressed flat on her knees. She was 29 years old and she had never once in her life asked me for anything. When we were kids, I did her permission slips. I taught her to drive. I drove 90 miles at midnight in 2016 to pick her up from a boyfriend's apartment and never told our parents about it. In 29 years, that was the first thing she had ever asked me for, and it was 4 weeks of quiet. I said, okay. I gave her June. It cost more than either of us knew, and I am the one who gave it away. Nora called me at 9 that night, and I could tell from the first word that she had been pacing. Our mother had phoned her after supper. Nora repeated most of it. Mom had said the family had let a thing sit for 6 years and it was going to come out at the worst possible time. At the reception, or at a christening, or in the checkout line at Kroger's with Corinne Whitfield standing behind her. Mom had said she was going to settle it Saturday, at the party, in front of everybody, so it could never follow Nora into that family. And then Nora said the last part slowly, because she did not understand it. She said, blood doesn't lie, Serena. She said your name, but she was talking to me. My sister asked me what it was. I stood in my kitchen with the phone against my ear and looked out the window at my own driveway, at my own car, at the glove box in that car, and I did not tell her. I said Mom was worked up about the program page. I said I would handle it. Nora said okay in a small voice and hung up. Then I stood there another minute after the call ended and let myself understand what my mother had actually said to my sister. She had used my name as a warning, not as a person, as a story about what happens to women who let something get out. 4 days. My mother had a black box on page 1 and a spot written in blue ink at the bottom of the toast list. I had 3 stapled pages that could end her in this county in 1 sentence, and they were sitting out there in the dark under a pair of jumper cables and an ice scraper I have never once needed in June. At 3 in the morning on Thursday, the unit was quiet, and Margot Dunlop sat down across from me in the break room with a cup of the terrible coffee and asked what was eating me. Margot is 61. She has been doing this since before I could read. I gave her the version with the edges filed off. Family thing. My mother. A laboratory. A party on Saturday. Something I know that other people do not know. She did not tell me what to do. She did not tell me she was sorry. She turned her cup around on the table and she asked me one question. Okay, she said. Whose truth is it? I started to answer. I got as far as it's my, and then I stopped. Because I was about to say my family's. And that is not a person. I went down the list in my head instead. Page 1 belonged to Ren, and after Ren to Adam. The line about R2 belonged to my father. The line about half-siblings belonged to my sister. The reason all of it existed belonged to my mother. And there was not one line on those 3 pages that belonged to 60 people in folding chairs under a string of lights in an orchard. Margot drank her coffee and let me sit in it. She said one more thing before she went back out on the floor. She said in 35 years she had never once seen a family healed by a piece of paper. Margot asked me that at 3 in the morning, and it took me 2 days to answer it. If you have ever held a piece of news that was not yours to hold, you know exactly what that silence feels like. Tell me in the comments what you would have done with those 3 pages. And subscribe, because Saturday is next. Thursday night, I told Adam everything. I sat him down at our kitchen table at 11 o'clock, and I went in order. The way I do it at work. The 6 specimens. The free matrix. Page 1, page 2, page 3. My father's name in a legend. The 5 months in 1990 and the ant in Ashland and the arithmetic. He put both hands flat on the table and looked at them for a long time. Then he said, okay. And then he said the other thing. He and Ren were not going Saturday. He was not asking me, and he was not apologizing, and he was not going to discuss it. He said Ren was going to spend that evening at the pool with him eating the concession stand nachos she is not allowed to have. Then he asked me the only question that mattered. Then why are you going? And I told him the truth. Because if I am not in that room, my mother tells the story. And whatever she says on Saturday is the version this town hands my daughter in 11 years, on a bus, or in a locker room, or at a graduation party, when I am not standing there. He nodded. He got up and got his keys off the hook and held them out to me and said, take his truck Saturday, because my car had something in the glove box I should not have within reach. I took my own car, and on Saturday afternoon, 20 minutes before I left, I went out to the driveway, took the envelope out of the glove box, and put it in the inside pocket of my coat. I do not have a good reason. I have never been able to explain that part to anybody, including him. Friday at 11 at night, I sat in my own car in my own driveway with the dome light on and the 3 pages open on my lap. I did the thing you do. I ran it. I pictured myself standing up in that pavilion and reading the additional findings section out loud in my flat work voice, 1 line at a time, all the way to the end. I pictured Corinne Whitfield's face going carefully blank. I pictured the women from the bake sale table doing the arithmetic on their fingers, 1990, 1991, and getting there about 4 seconds after everybody else. I pictured my mother standing in the middle of it with her readers on their beaded chain. I could see all of that clearly, and some part of me wanted it so badly that my hands were cold. Then I pictured my father, in his good shirt, hearing it from a folding chair with 60 people watching his face to see how he took it. That is where the picture stopped. It would not go past him. So I made 3 rules. Out loud, alone in a car. I would not deny anything. I would not read anything. And if what was on page 3 had to leave that envelope, it was going to leave it in my voice. To him. First, in private, with a door shut. Then I did one more thing, which was to say the worst line out loud in the car to hear how it sounded coming from me. Samples M1 and N1 are consistent with a half-sibling relationship. It sounded like my mother. That settled it. I made those rules at 11 at night when nobody was looking at me. That is the only time rules are cheap. The party was Saturday the 14th of June, 6 o'clock, at the pavilion in the Whitfield Orchard 6 miles out on Route 9. It was still full daylight. The grass had been cut that morning and the whole place smelled like cut grass and green apples and citronella. 60 folding chairs, long tables with white paper and mason jars. A string of lights somebody had hung an hour too early, glowing pale against a sky that did not need them yet. A Bluetooth speaker on the gift table playing a country station low. Taped to the corner of that table, handwritten on the back of an envelope, was the order of the toasts. Grant's uncle, Corinne, Nora, me. My mother had written herself in at the bottom in blue ink. My father was over by the coolers in the shirt he wears to funerals and weddings, the collar starched hard, moving bags of ice with a pair of tongs because somebody told him not to use his hands. My mother had a stiff-sided handbag with a clasp, cream-colored, and in 3 hours I never once saw her set it down. She carried it through the buffet line. She carried it while she hugged Corinne. I counted the people in that pavilion who already knew some piece of this, and I got to 7. Nora found me by the lemonade and squeezed my wrist and said thank you for coming, and I said of course, and neither of us said anything else, because there was nothing safe to say. At 6:40, while Grant's uncle was still telling us stories about a tractor, my mother looked across the pavilion at me. She gave me one small nod, the kind you give somebody when you are about to be sorry for them. Then she picked up a butter knife and walked toward the microphone stand. She tapped the glass 3 times and the pavilion went down to nothing but the speaker. She started it like a toast, and she was good at it. She thanked Corinne for the orchard. She said Nora had been the easiest baby in the county. She said the Whitfields were fine people and that fine people deserve to know who they are marrying into, and a couple of the older men laughed because it sounded like the start of a joke about in-laws. Then she said, "We don't hide things in this family." And she opened the clasp on that cream handbag and took out a manila envelope, and I watched 60 people lean forward about an inch. She put her readers on. She unfolded 3 stapled pages. She held them out at arm's length, tipped back her chin, and read the black box straight through. And my mother has a lovely reading voice. She read scripture in that church for 20 years. The alleged father, sample AF2, Adam Shaw, is excluded as the biological father of the child. Sample C1, Ren Shaw. Probability of paternity, 0%. She lowered the pages. She looked at Nora, not at me, when she said it. She's not his. Nobody moved. The speaker on the gift table kept playing, some song about a truck, for 4 or 5 awful seconds until Grant reached over and shut it off with his thumb. A woman in the 3rd row said, "Oh," very quietly. Corinne Whitfield looked at her own hands. My father stopped with the tongs halfway to the cooler, and every single face in that pavilion, one after another, turned around to find mine. Nora said, "Mom, just that once, the way you say it to stop a car." My mother did not look at her. I set my glass down on the paper tablecloth, carefully, so it would not make a sound. Then I stood up. "That's correct," I said. I said it in my work voice, the one I use at 2 in the morning in a room with a door, and it carried farther than my mother's had, because I did not have to push it. "That report is accurate. I want to say the rest of it myself, so nobody has to guess." And then I told 60 people in folding chairs the thing I had planned to tell my daughter at a kitchen table in 4 years. I said Adam was diagnosed with cancer at 26. I said the chemotherapy that saved his life took that from him, and that we banked 1 sample in 4 days and it did not survive being frozen. I said, we spent 3 years and a lot of money at a clinic in Columbus, and we used a donor, and there were 2 cycles that failed before the one that did not. I said Ren was born in March of 2019, and her father cut the cord with his hands shaking. I said, he is at the pool with her right now, and that was on purpose. I did not apologize. I did not explain why we had kept it quiet, because everybody sitting in that orchard already knew why, and half of them were the reason. Nobody said anything. Nora had both hands over her mouth. Corinne Whitfield was looking at the grass in a way that told me she would be a decent person about this later, and a terrible one about my mother. Somebody's chair scraped, an uncle getting up to go stand by the coolers because he could not sit in it anymore. What I remember most is how ordinary it felt to say, "I have delivered worse news than that to strangers in a hospital hallway with my hand on a doorframe," and the words come out at the same speed either way. And my mother stood at that microphone with 3 pages in her hand, and I watched the paper start to shake. She should have stopped there. Any person who wanted to be forgiven would have stopped there. But my mother has spent 40 years being the one who is right about what a family is, and you do not put that down in front of witnesses. She said, "Well?" She said it twice. Then her voice came up, and it kept coming up. And for the first time in my entire life, I heard Delia Tennant get loud in a public place. She said a child ought to know where she comes from. She said she had not made anything up, that the paper said what it said, and that she would not be made into the villain for holding up a fact. And then she said it, out over 60 people, with her chin trembling. Blood doesn't lie, Serena. I walked toward her. 3 steps, 4, and I stopped an arm's length short because I was not going to touch her, and I was not going to take that envelope out of her hands. I kept my voice low enough that only the first 2 rows really got it, which is why the version that went around town afterward was wrong. I said, "Mom, there are 3 pages there. You paid for all 3. She stared at me. "Keep reading," I said. And then I waited. I want to be honest about this part, because I have gone back and forth on it for a long time. I waited long enough for it to be a real choice. She could have folded that envelope. She could have said something about the cake. She could have walked out to her car. I stood there and gave my mother the exact thing she has never given one person in her life, which is a way out with her dignity still on. She looked down. She turned the page. She read it the way you read something you are about to win with. Chin up, readers down her nose, that lovely church voice. Additional findings, all pairs analysis. Her eyes went to the legend, then down to the first line, and she started it clean. Sample R2, Raymond Tennant, is excluded as the biological father of sample M1. The word excluded came out whole. She got a full beat past it before it landed. Then she stopped, and her mouth stayed open, and everybody in that pavilion heard the rest of the sentence in their own heads at the same time. Somebody set a glass down too hard. My father was standing at the coolers with the tongs still in his hand. He did not move at all. Nora turned and looked at our mother the way you look at a stranger who has said your address out loud, and my mother, holding the paper up like it had betrayed her personally, said, "This is a mistake." She said it again, louder. "This is a mistake. There's been a mix-up at the lab." Nobody answered her. Nobody in that orchard said one word for what felt like a full minute. I watched the room change temperature. That is the part nobody warns you about. Up until that sentence, they had all been embarrassed for my mother, and 60 embarrassed people will look at their plates and let a thing die. But now there was blood in it, and blood is interesting, and I could feel every person in that orchard quietly deciding they were going to stay for the rest. Then a man in the back row, one of Grant's cousins, said, not even unkindly, just the way a person asks about a ball game, "Well, what's the rest of it say?" I could have answered him. I want to be very clear, because this is the part of the story I actually own. I knew the next line by heart. Samples M1 and N1 are consistent with a half-sibling relationship. Full sibling hypothesis excluded. I knew about February to July of 1990. I knew about an aunt in Ashland and a thin old man in a co-op jacket 71 miles up the state route. 1 sentence, maybe 2, and my mother would have been finished in this county for the rest of her life, the same way this county finished her in 1985, and every woman in that pavilion would have gone home with it. I walked up to her instead. I took the 3 pages out of my mother's hands, and she let me, and I folded them in half and put them in my coat pocket. I felt the staple catch on the lining. Then I turned around to the man in the back row and I said, "It says what it says. It isn't yours." And to the room, "This is my sister's engagement party. Sit down and eat something." And then to my mother, quietly, close enough that I could smell the hairspray, the same as in my bathroom on Easter Sunday. "You don't get to hand people their own lives in an envelope." She said my name. I said, Clean was never the job, Mom. She was still holding her arm out like the pages were in it. Behind me, somebody started stacking plates, loud, on purpose, the way people do when they want the air to move again. Then I walked the length of that pavilion, past 60 folding chairs and every face in Kellerton, to the coolers, and I put my hand on my father's arm. "Dad," I said, "come out to the truck with me." We sat in his old green pickup at the edge of the gravel with both doors shut. Somebody in the pavilion turned the music back on, low, because that is what people do. I told him in order, the way I do it at work. 6 samples, the free option on the order form. What page 3 is, what a legend is, what excluded means and what it does not mean. The 5 months in 1990. Ashland. I told him I had known since the 6th of June, and I told him that was 8 days, and I did not soften that part or explain it, because it was mine to have done and mine to say. He looked through the windshield at the apple trees. He asked 2 questions. "Does she know that I know?" I said she does now. Then, after a while, "How long has she had it?" I said since the 28th of May. He nodded slowly, twice, the way he does at a diagnosis on a piece of equipment. Then he said, "Well." My father put his hand on the steering wheel and he said, "I was there when they weighed you. 6 pounds, 1 ounce. There was a clock on the wall and the nurse had cold hands. Nothing in that envelope was in that room." I could not say anything for a second. Then I said, very quietly, "Blood doesn't lie, it just doesn't get a vote." He laughed once. 1 breath, no sound in it. He opened the door and walked back up to the pavilion and took his jacket off the back of a folding chair, and he did not take anything else. My father rented a room over the hardware store for $600 a month and stayed 4 months, and then he moved into the apartment over our garage, where he is now. He filed for legal separation, not divorce, because at 73, the insurance and the pension do not care how you feel. He has not missed a Tuesday swim lesson. Nora and Grant got married in November at the courthouse with 14 people, and lunch afterward at a place with paper placemats. Corinne Whitfield has not spoken to my mother since June. My sister did not speak to me for 9 months, and I did not chase her, because I finally understood that a person is allowed to have their own reaction on their own schedule. She came to Ren's 7th birthday, stood in my kitchen holding a gift bag, and said 1 sentence. "I should have let you tell me in the fitting room." My mother is still on Sycamore Street. She still goes to Bible study on Tuesday nights. 3 women stopped calling her and the rest did not, and she tells a version where she is the one who was ambushed, and about 1/3 of this town believes it. Ashgrove Genetics sent a form apology and refunded $400 to her. I drove to Ashland once, in September, and sat in a diner for 40 minutes across from a thin man with enormous hands who did not apologize and did not ask me for anything. There has not been a second time yet. And a month before that, in August, in the parking lot at the pool, I told my daughter the truth in 3 sentences a 6-year-old could carry. Last July, I was at the Kellerton public pool with a folding chair and a paperback I did not read. Ren was 7. A boy from her class asked her, in the loud way children ask things, why she did not look like her dad. And my daughter stood there dripping on the concrete and said, "A person helped my mom and dad have me. My dad's my dad. Can I have your goggles?" Then she got back in the water. My father was up on the bleachers with a stopwatch he bought specifically for this. My mother spent 40 years believing a family is a clean page, and all she ever proved is that a page you have to keep clean is a page nobody is allowed to live on. That's my story. 1 hairbrush, 3 pages. A truck with the doors shut. If somebody in your family has been deciding what you are allowed to know about your own life, take this as your sign to ask out loud, today, in plain words, to the person it actually belongs to. If this reached you, send it to the woman who needs it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.